Hello there, welcome to 3Spoonies. We're your hosts, Karen, Jo and Claire. This is episode number 61.5 and we're discussing sensory engagement and overwhelm. Let's get into some questions.
Are you drowning in admin? Struggling to keep up with emails, invoices, social media, or the endless to-do list that comes with running a business? Then it's time to call in Vicky Admin Fairy, an award-winning virtual assistant who brings order to admin chaos. Vicky works with all entrepreneurs, regardless of their background or abilities, to take care of the time-consuming tasks that slow you down. Whether it's managing emails, sorting financial admin, handling social media, chasing late payments, the list is endless. She saves business owners hours every week, reducing stress and ensuring everything runs smoothly. With 25 years of experience, a flexible, client-focused approach, and a reputation for going above and beyond, Vicky adapts to your needs, making your business more efficient so you can focus on what you do best. And the best part? You'll have more free time to grow your business, boost profits, or just enjoy life without admin headaches. Want to free up your time and get your business running more smoothly? Visit www.vickyadminfairy.co.uk or email hello@vickyadminfairy.co.uk to find out how Vicky can help you.
Hello, I'm Karen from Pony Pony Pony.
And I'm Jo from Bright Cat Business Solutions.
Claire from Black Bell Stationery.
And together we're 3Spoonies working our way through life and business with not enough spoons. We are joined again by Dr Joanna Grace. Hello, hello.
Thanks for having me again.
You're very, very welcome. We have very much enjoyed talking to you. Would you like to tell our listeners, viewers, and others a little bit about you and what you do?
So I am a sensory engagement, inclusion and belonging specialist. I focus on people with profound and multiple learning disabilities. Internationally would be known as people with profound intellectual and multiple disabilities and autistic experience. And I am an autistic adult and I parent an autistic son and a non-autistic son. And I've previously been a foster carer for children with complex disabilities and a special school teacher and various other things that you don't really need to know about.
I think that's all very relevant. I think having more than one perspective is always valuable, and having the theory and the practical balanced as well. As wonderful as both are, don't get me wrong. So I'm just going to pass over to Claire for some questions. Whoosh!
Whoosh, cat. Okay, so we've got a few questions in the community for you. Our first one is from Fee, who says, I have an exam coming up and my tutor will be walking around with clacky heels on. It's bad enough normally, but the exam hall echoes more and I need to concentrate. Can I ask her to wear flats or soft soles?
Yes. But I mean, the question sort of goes back to can you? Because to do that is a big ask of a lot of people because you're having to put your needs first and speak to somebody who's in a position of authority and then articulate a need that you have, which is a vulnerable position to put yourself in and to risk them saying no. So it's not as simple as it sounds in the question. Is nobody can just ask. But if you can ask, or if you can find a way of asking, it's a very reasonable adjustment to ask for. And that term reasonable adjustment is a useful one to use. If you can't ask, then finding ways to mitigate that yourself, which is a botched solution, isn't it? So if you were allowed to wear like loop earphones to mitigate the noise for you in the exam, or if there is something that you can take into the exam, obviously within all the exam rules, or something that you can wear that reduces sensory stress, then sometimes you can't avoid the thing that's going to cause you sensory stress. But if you can, it's like a balance, isn't it? If you've got something that's tipping the balance in one direction, if you can take something that tips it back in the other, then that can be a coping strategy. But I would certainly support asking, and I would hope that places are aware that that's a useful sort of thing to do, not just for you. Maybe that's the way to encourage yourself to ask, actually, to recognize that if you are brave enough to do this, it will help you and it will help a whole load of other people as well who can't ask. So I think sometimes it's easier to motivate ourselves when we realize that we're doing it for somebody else rather than doing it for ourselves.
Definitely. I think we
That's
all find it a bit easier if we're asking for others over ourselves. It's kind of, you don't feel kind of as put on the spot. It's like, oh, it's not for me, it's for someone else. I can do this.
Yeah.
It could also be if you've got a some sort of teaching support person, it might be asking them to back you up as well. And one thing I have found with the loops is that sometimes people are accused of it being earphones and cheating, which is,
Okay.
some people don't realise. And there are also the flare ones, which I do find take off particularly the top end, that sort of clack, 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 like you said. That can be helpful without sort of dulling everything. I found them a bit better than the loops, and there's no way anyone is mistaking them for earpods or anything because they just don't look like it. But
Usually
yeah,
like
I think
one
that's a
person
very
that'll be
reasonable
like,
thing
is
to
that
ask
better?
them. Yeah, having been exam support as well, people should be aware of the noise they're making or how standing behind someone can be very distracting because, you can sense someone's there, things like that. I think it is worth all the people supporting exams sort of being very aware of what they're doing and how that can help or hinder performance. So proper training for everyone.
Definitely would help for sure. So our next question is from Deacon, and he says, my work t-shirt, which is a polo shirt, has terrible seams. I usually wear an undershirt so it doesn't bother me, but it gets too hot in the summer. Is there anything else I can do to make it more comfy?
Presumably has to wear that shirt because so you can buy bias binding that you can iron onto things, and it's made for hemming garments. But if you got some like satin bias binding or something, you might be able to cover the seams and you just iron it on. It's a sort of a botch to try and make a duff shirt better. Your undergarment is a great plan. You might be able to find there are some undergarments that claim to be cooling. I don't know if they make them for the top half of bodies. I'm only aware of shorts that claim to be cooling. So you might find a thinner undergarment, but it's the same answer as the clacking heels, really, isn't it? That if you are going to be put under sensory stress by something, if you can find something that tips the other end of that sensory balance, so it's not that you can avoid the stress, but you can provide yourself with sensory comfort in a different direction, that can help you cope with it. It's not a solve. A solve would be to ask permission to not wear the shirt, but that asking is, again, it's a big, big thing to ask of anybody.
Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you for that. And our last question is from Rosa, and she says, there's a horrible fluorescent light right above my desk. Should I move to somewhere else in the office? Absolutely, yes.
Yes, it's a big, it feels like you're making a fuss, doesn't it? Because it's just a light and you need light to be able to see your work, and nobody else is making the same fuss. So you're causing a problem and you're making an issue and you're having to get everybody to shift around. But if you are processing visual stimulation in a different way, you're not just making a fuss. So sitting under a flickering light like that would be the equivalent of asking somebody else to work with a car alarm going on the desk next to them. That you're able to do it at all is a huge testament to your own sort of personal grit and determination. And you are completely entitled to ask. It's the same as all the questions, isn't it? You are entitled to ask to move. And I wonder if a recognition that this is being rather than behavior can empower that sense of, I am entitled to ask for this. I'm not making a fuss. I'm not being unreasonable. I think quite often when you encounter descriptions of neurodivergence, for example, if you're thinking, I think I might be autistic, or I think my child might be autistic, you might look up online, how can I tell if I'm autistic or not? And what you will get is a list of behavior patterns. They might do this, they might do this, they might do this. And actually, when you go for diagnosis, you're diagnosed based on behavior patterns. So we're looking at behavior and always looking at behavior and describing patterns of behavior. And that focus on behavior makes it sound like it's something people are doing rather than something people are being. And the reason that we're looking for behavior is because the difference in neurodivergent people is one you can't see externally. It's a difference in the wirings in your brain. It's a difference in the processing capacities in your brain. So it's a physiological reality in the brain, but the only way we can witness that is through the behaviors that we see. It's not the only way. The neuroscientists that study us, and I'm not a great fan of the neuroscience because it's done for all sorts of dubious reasons, but they can see neurodivergence in the brain at every level of brain imaging. It's there. So you could see it if you could look into your brain, but mostly we're not looking into your brain. We're looking at what your brain is, ordering your body to do, and we're looking at your behavior. And that gives us that impression that this is something that we are doing, that we are making a fuss, that we are not trying hard enough. And if you recognize it as being, so I have a test that I've been getting schools to do lately to see whether the strategies that they're using with their autistic students are safe for autistic students. And it's a bit of a flippant test, but I still think it's a good one. So the question I asked them is, would it help a cat in a swimming pool? Because cats in swimming pools, terribly scratchy, bitey creatures. And what they need is just to be told to not bite and scratch. And it's not going to fix it, is it? The cat in the swimming pool is going to carry on. Cat in the swimming pool, terribly stressed, really needs to chill out, that cat. Just a few sessions of mindfulness would really calm it down, wouldn't help a cat in the swimming pool. And if your fluorescent light is a version of that, and the point that is being made in that silly little analogy is that the cat is in the wrong environment. That's why it's behaving like that. That's why it's struggling. That's why it's stressed. That's why its reactions are wrong, is because it's in the wrong environment. And if you physiologically are in the wrong environment, it's no more your fault than it is the fault of a fish on a beach flapping around that it can't breathe type of thing. The environmental differences are really, really significant. And so you are well entitled to ask to switch from the light, to have your earphones on in the exam, to wear a different shirt to work. These are simple adjustments that create access at an environmental level.
Well, thank you so much for all your answers. They are really good, and I love the way they all kind of tie in together. And I love your little
Yeah, they were all the same sort of thing, weren't they? Yeah.
But I love the little test that you put to schools as well. I think that's really clever.
I thought you can come on my Facebook. I've done a painting of the cat in the swimming pool.
Well, now I'm going to have a look at that. Definitely need to see that. But yeah, that is all our questions from the community. So I'm going to pass the whoosh back to Karen.
Whoosh. Well, thank you for joining us once again, and thank you for those answers. Is there anything you'd like to tell us about? Any useful resources, any handy links, anything like that?
Just to say that if people have more questions like that, I am mostly reading research on trains. And although I should be focused on reading my research, pop-up messages on Facebook or messages on LinkedIn, these are very welcome interruptions. So if people come up with more questions after hearing the episode, I'm happy to be contacted. And you will find free resources from me on YouTube, where I'm at The Sensory Projects, and free resources on my website, www.thesensoryprojects.co.uk, where you can also buy my books and book me to do training and things like that.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
And thank you to all of you for joining us for 3 Spoonies on sensory engagement and overwhelm. We'd love to know your thoughts in the chat, and do feel free to subscribe for our weekly podcast. You can also leave us a review. Links, as ever, will be in the show notes, so you can give them a click and find out all the handy things. We'll see you next week for our next topic. Representation on the telly box. Have a great day. Keep track of your spoons and remember your words.